Hola, ¿qué tal? Soy Matías Rebolledo y estamos aquí en el Festival de Sitges, 58a edició del Festival de Cinema Fantàstica de Cataluña, en este set audiovisual patrocinado por Repsol y con la colaboración de la SCAC. Hoy recibimos con toda la energía. We have here, with all our energy, Ben Leonberg, director, Good Boy. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you for having us.
Welcome to our set. Welcome to Sitges. It's your first time here in Sitges, in the festival.
That's my first time, but I'm a big fan. I always read the coverage about the films here every year.
Yeah, I kind of actually like that because I dig into that because there's a lot of American directors and European directors that they really fancy sieges around the world. We are not conscious in Spain maybe about that.
Oh no, a lot of I every year I read in Fangoria and Rumor, they do coverage about the films that play here. This is one of, I would say, like for the fall season, before Halloween, this is like the bellwether of like for a horror fan of like what movies to watch. So it means a lot to me for sure.
Well, let's talk about Good Boy, one of the most talked about movies of the season. I'm sure you're glad about that, but I wanted to ask you first of all, did you expect to be so talked about, to be so relevant in this season of cinema?
I mean, it's funny because I very much believed in the idea that, I think everyone can relate to the feel. If you've ever had a dog, you've wondered, why does my dog suddenly start barking at nothing or stare into an empty corner? So I thought it would be highly relatable, but no one could have expected for it to kind of the reaction to be what it has. We're so happy about it, especially considering that the way we made the movie was as a family project. It was me and my wife and my dog, and people helping us, slowly over a long period of time. To have it suddenly go off to the races is delightful.
Let me take you back to the start. How and mostly when did you start to work on the film?
Yeah, so I first came up with the idea to, tell a haunted house story from a dog's point of view after watching the film Poltergeist
Hmm.
for probably the millionth time. And if you remember, that story begins with the golden retriever wandering through the house, clearly clued into the haunting before the humans have figured it out. Um, I think I first wrote down the idea for what that movie could look like in 2012. 5 years later, I start working on the script, and I got my dog Indy, who is the dog who appears in the film. And I didn't initially think that my own dog could, lead a haunted house movie or any movie. And I very slowly, as I was writing the script with my co-writer Alex Cannon, and then testing these, short films with Indy, trying to figure out how do you use point of view with an actor who doesn't know he's in a movie to make a movie, and the result is Good Boy. 9 years later.
I wanted to ask you about Inji. Was he a diva on set? How was that?
Well, I don't know if he was a diva, but the fact that he didn't know he was in a movie definitely made it a sillier movie production than normal. Like movies are always making make believe and pretending, which is fun. That's why they're fun to make. But with a dog who can't understand, how to sit on a mark or catch the light exactly correctly, meant we were always working around him. Not so much training him to be in the movie, as in maybe it was more like training ourselves to figure out how to make the film based on things he could already do. And then when assembled in post, it would look like a performance. So he wasn't a diva, but he was always fun and unpredictable to work with.
It's amazing the work of Indy in the film. But I wanted to ask you, how do you achieve that? For example, when he's looking, somewhere specifically, how would a normal day on set work with him?
Yeah, so a normal day, we were only filming a few hours a day because that's his attention span was our most precious resource, and that was only good for a few hours. Like 1 to 2 was as a pretty good day. Maybe he can go a little more than that, and that means that we're only getting a shot a day, and frequently those shots wouldn't work the first time we tried them. And controlling where he's looking, figuring out how to guide his blocking, how he enters a scene, pauses, hears a strange noise. That was always like a little bit of a behind the scenes challenge that I would set up the camera, anticipate where I thought he would go if I like made a noise or called his name, And then I would frequently have my wife, the film's producer, hiding behind some boxes or behind some coats to like give him a second cue or instruction while also being in the shot. So we were always improvising to kind of like figure out what stimulus can we give Indy that will look like a performance when he reacts to it. And then in post, there's so much that the editing and especially the sound design does to really make it look like a performance. Because the reality of what's happening on set is me and my wife are just, giving commands and sometimes nonsense words to our dog that he's looking at us with a small puzzled head tilt that looks like a performance in the end.
I wanted to ask you about the tone of the film because I think it's very hard to find the right amount of darkness for the film, not being too cute because we are
Yeah.
centered around the dog. So how did you manage to balance that?
No, that's a great question. Because the dog is so cute, we thought the story, the human drama that's happening behind him can be in some cases quite grim. The story of Indy's owner is, he's clearly when the film begins going through some kind of crisis and then is moved into this old family house that looks really haunted and he's not in a very good place. But because Indy is so likable and so cute and loves this guy so much, I think those things counteract one another in a way that is both interesting because of their juxtaposition, but then also I don't think the movie feels like really, really dark. I still hope it's fun to watch and there's an adventure element to it, that as Indy is uncovering this mystery of what happened in the house and is trying to figure out what's going on with his person, and then ultimately trying to fight to save the day. I think it still feels hopefully like a roller coaster ride.
Well, in the film, there's not a lot of dialogue. So I wanted to ask you, how did you find the right scenes in order to tell your story? It kind of feels like when I was watching it, I kind of saw the storyboard for the film in my mind. I was so. How did you work on that?
I mean, that's a great question. And we did storyboard the whole movie ahead of time. Fortunately, I'm not a very good illustrator, so I only did like stick figures and drawings because at the end of the day, Indy can't hit exact marks anyway. So it was good just to have a rough outline of how I thought the film would progress visually. And you're exactly right to mention that without dialogue, telling the narrative is challenging when your main character can't speak. He also isn't as smart as a person. So we have to have kind of procedural beats of a story unfold in a way that a dog can be in the driver's seat, which meant we were always trying to figure out, how do we tell the story in a way that will either make sense to a dog or that because of his unique canine senses, we're experiencing it from his point of view. So there's scenes where instead of listening to a person, there actually will be an important human conversation going on in the background, which because he can't understand, he will wander away and follow his nose. And then we will sometimes see, the results of where that leads him, which will be a small corner that he can fit into that the humans can't, where he then can kind of advance the plot through his observations and his point of view.
Um, One last question about the movie. I wanted to ask you about the texture of the creatures. How did you manage to find that? Because it's very practical. It's very, grim. I feel it like very sticky. So how was that?
Yeah, so the supernatural force that we see, I wanted to try and imagine what would a Grim Reaper figure, what would that be like for a dog? Because the skeleton with the cloak and the hourglass and the scythe, those are symbols that make sense to a person, but that doesn't mean anything to a dog. So the idea was how do you kind of create this specter of looming death and make it so the visuals speak to maybe the natural world? I had heard this story about when animals in the wild or even pets, when they're near the end of their lives, they'll seek out cold, wet areas to kind of lay down in the mud before they finally die. And I just thought that's a very haunting idea to think of. So the supernatural is a bit muddier and very practically. So I play that specter of death. I got covered head to toe in this really vile black mud, but it looks great on camera. So it was a muddy but very practical thing. And what's funny about all of this is that I think it looks great on camera. It has this really great cinematic quality. The reality of Indy's reaction to all this mud, I don't know if you've been around a lot of dogs in mud, but they love it in reality. So it was no hardship to get Indy dirty and muddy and interact with the boogeymen of the film.
Please stay with me when one question. Vamos con la última pregunta, pero os recordamos que las energías de Repsol mueven el Festival de Sitges y por segundo año Repsol está presente no solo aportando sus soluciones energéticas, sino ofreciendo distintas experiencias para que el público lo pase de miedo. I was telling our spectators that Repsol, our partner, is helping here people to get frightened and to get the chills. So I wanted to ask you, what is your very first memory of horror in film?
So my first memory, and this was an important one, was in the Disney movie Fantasia, where they animate classical music. They bring it to life through animation. Night on Bald Mountain, the famous, Chernobog Walpurgis monster coming to life on the top of the mountain and then summoning all like the creatures of the night. I was just fascinated by that as a kid. And there's so much to choose from there. It's not even that I think I understood the story of the song or the visuals, other than it was just one night and it was like all these creatures came out and there's witches and skeletons and demons and monsters. It was like a buffet. I would watch that just like on repeat, and I would get my dad to like draw the creatures and then cut them out and like, play with the little cutouts. Yeah. Very important to me. I don't know what I took from that, but I know it's with me.
Well, sir, thank you for your time, and let's hope for the best for the film.
Thank you so much.
Nosotros, ya sabéis, Good Boy va a estrenarse en cines en España de la mano de Filmin y ya sabéis que vamos a seguir con todo lo que pase aquí en este Festival de Sitges, en este set audiovisual patrocinado por Repsol en colaboración con la SCAC. Todo lo que ocurra en kinótico.es, la primera con K, la segunda con C.